Welcome everyone. We'll get started in just a minute. If you want to put your answer to the question of the day, what new item have you tried on your menu this year and what did your students think? And feel free to put that in the chat box. See some really yummy sounding stuff. KFC bowl copycat, love a copycat recipe. Okay, well, we're 2 minutes after, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome again, everyone. Feel free to continue putting your answers in the chat. We love those new menu item ideas. My name is Paige Pokorny. I'm with No Kid Hungry, and today we're talking all about CEP, or the Community Eligibility Provision. So our official title. You've gone CEP, now what? So we're going to dig into that question with my colleague here, Sally Spero, and she is our No Kid Hungry national consultant focusing on CEP. Next slide. A few housekeeping notes. The webinar is being recorded and the slides will be shared out after the webinar ends, and you will receive that via email. We have closed captioning available on this webinar, so feel free to click that if you would like. And if you have any accessibility or technology issues, you can always message the panelists, share our strength in the chat. We encourage you to use the chat box throughout the session to engage with each other and the speakers. There's a variety of people on the call, so we want to tap into that cumulative experience. And today will be an extra participatory webinar. We have a couple surprises for you. At the end of today's webinar, a brief survey will pop up on your browser window, and we really would love for you to take a moment to complete that. It's short, super short, and it really does. We read every single response and it informs our webinars moving forward. Now for today's agenda. After these brief welcomes and introductions, I'm going to kick it over to Sally. She's the expert here, and she'll be talking all about strategies to make CEP a success. And as I mentioned, Sally is one of our consultants, and her focus is on CEP. And then we'll do a little engagement. We want to hear from you how CEP is going. So we'll be using what's called a Padlet, basically an online link that we'll send out to you in the chat box, and we can hear from you how CEP is going in real time. And then last but not least, we'll spend a good amount of time on Q&A. So as you have those questions, don't hesitate to put them in the Q&A box throughout the webinar, and at the end, we'll be sure to get to each and every one of them. Next slide. Okay, so step one of participant engagement. We want to hear from you. So if you don't mind taking a moment and answering these 4 questions. First, what is your goal? We want to hear who's on the call. Second, how long have you operated CEP? Number 3, how many of your schools in your district operate CEP? And number 4, how's it going? Also, I can't help but scroll through the chat to look at all these delicious menu items. I'm hungry already, just reading through these. So thanks for sharing and keep continuing if you'd like. All right, Chelsea, if you feel like it's been enough time, feel free to close that poll. And I believe participants will be able to see. Okay, so we have a large number of school nutrition directors and staff, about 60%. We also have some school administration, state agencies, and advocates on the call, so welcome. We have a lot of first timers, yay, for CEP. So welcome, welcome, 49% of you, it's your first year operating CEP, and then a smattering across the board for the rest. So this is the webinar for you newcomers and also the veterans. I'm sure you'll be able to take something to improve CEP in your district. Many of you are district-wide CEP, that's great, but we also know that site-based CEP is a great solution to getting access to meals at the schools that are eligible. Oh, and I love to see this. 62% of you say that CEP is going great. Love to hear it. I'm sure you'll be able to still get something out of this webinar. And for those of you who said, it's okay, but could be better, or you're really struggling, I really do hope that this webinar can be helpful to turn CEP around for you a little bit. Okay. So with that, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, in our new community eligibility provision and need a primer, feel free to click the link. I'll put it in the chat now and you can visit our website. We will not be doing a CEP overview in this webinar. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sally.
Hi, good morning, everyone. And I'm glad you are here to do the webinar and keep on track with CEP. We're going to do something a little different in my presentation. Share our strength is breaking new ground. We're going to have commercial breaks, and I hope you'll find that they will be fun. Okay, let's look at the first slide. So the first thing, now that the CEP is off and running, you want to start keeping track of where your program is going. And you might want to compare that to any sites that you have that are not CEP, or you might want to compare that to the previous data that you had for CEP. So the key performance indicators that help us keep on track on our program are really kind of standard. The first thing is with CEP, is your participation higher or lower? Is it staying the same? Is it increased at one meal more than another meal? Just want to check that out and see how it's going so far. Another thing, of course, tied to participation is revenue. Since some of the meals might not be paid at the full free rate, how is that affecting your revenue? Is it taking a hit? Is it managing to stay in a good area? It's just a good time to look at that. Another thing you want to look at is your meals per work hour. Without having to collect money or help kids find PIN numbers or, look at all the processing of the paperwork at the end of the day, is that having an effect on your meals per work hour? Are you getting greater productivity? Another thing is administrative time. Now, I know you're always there, but if you don't have to help process all those applications and overdue bills, what other things have you been doing with your time? Have you been able to take on some other projects or devote more time to an important area? That might be a good thing to think about at this point in time. And then any feedback that you've gotten from parents, from teachers or principals, from your own staff, as far as how CEP might be working. And then mailing costs, if you're not having to send out a lot of letters and overdue lunch account notices, was that a cost? And then finally, the difference in uncollected funds. Okay, now we're going to stay on this screen, but we're going to have our first commercial break. So our first commercial takes place in your head because I had no production budget. So let's imagine that there is an SUV and it's going down a road in a beautiful bunch of cliffs in the ocean. And then it turns off and it's climbing up a mountain, and maybe it's going through a stream and it's going up and up and up. And finally they stop at a place and there's a beautiful vista of our American homeland. And they really want you to buy this SUV, but you know that whoever buys that SUV is not taking it any of those places. They're taking it to the mall on the day when you are busy, and they have parked in a place clearly marked compact. And so you cannot park next to them where your car actually would fit because you wouldn't be able to open your door. All right, now our second commercial in our commercial break is for, next slide, meal claiming 101. If you're new and a little unsure, please pay attention to one of our resources on CEP meal claiming. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled program. There's some things that you need to be doing this time of year to keep making CEP a good success. The first thing is to be sure that you have the October direct certification download. That's usually a really good one because they've gotten out all the kids from last year that weren't supposed to be there. They've got all the siblings in. They've just kind of cleaned up that data, and it's usually a really good one to get you an idea of what's going on with direct certification this year. Another thing is to get the updated Head Start enrollment. You know, at the school and at the Head Start, there's always people that register that don't show up, and then they or they get dropped and they go away. So you want to get that updated Head Start enrollment because, of course, those kids count in your ISP as well. Another thing that you're going to want to do is get in touch with the person who is doing the migrant, homeless, runaway, and foster information in your district. Again, they probably now tracked down all these people, got them going, got them organized, and you will have that good data. Another thing you want to do is start promoting SNAP, because the more people that get into the SNAP program, it increases your ISP. So some of the things that you can do is, one, just very easy, put a link on your website for SNAP where people could apply if they wanted to. Another thing is be sure that the counselors and the social workers in your district know about SNAP. They probably do, but just be sure that they have any materials that they would need to help families. If you're going to any events at the schools, like back to school nights or family meetings or things like that, you could take some SNAP information with you. And then finally, the community nonprofits, if they're having any like health fairs or things like that. And another thing, it doesn't even have to be like a food related one. There's a lot of nonprofits that come in and do things with families for like athletics and things like that, that they might be able to add SNAP information to their handouts. Okay, now we're going to stay on the slide. Go back, Chelsea. Yeah. We got to do our first commercial, our second commercial. Okay. And our second commercial, we're going to imagine that we see on the screen a bunch of happy people. There's friends, they're holding each other and being reunited. There's grandparents holding on to little toddlers. There's couples walking hand in hand, obviously sharing a happy moment. There's a family on a picnic. And while all these happy things are going on, there is an ominous voice saying, ask your doctor about snakeolia. It might cure your disease, or it might give you pains in all your joints, or make your breath short, or give you heart palpitations, or make you get an infection in some weird part of your body, or maybe you'll even drop dead. But maybe not. Good luck. Okay. And our second commercial is for Snap in School's webpage. So that if you want to come up with some ideas on how to support SNAP, then you can do it. And check out all the resources there. Very good. And then do we have another one? I think we do. I love this one. I like it. Groceries are expensive. Ain't that the truth? And I think that's just such a great resource to get people's attention. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled program. We're going to try to maximize the CEP benefits. Since you have it, you might as well get much out of it as you can. So the first thing is Can you add new lines or carts for faster service? That's the #1 reason why kids say they don't eat was the line too long. So you can see if you're not having to collect money and process students, if you could use that labor time to get some faster service to the kids. Another thing that you can do is to check out the CEP Communications Tool Kits for marketing ideas, to let kids know that and families know that CEP is available. I mean, you think everybody knows. Everybody doesn't know. They have their own things going on. Some of these people won't figure this out for months. So if you have marketing, it really helps get your word out. And then finally, breakfast after the bell. Now, we all think we have to start all our new programs the first day of school, but actually, I don't even like to do that because I think it's a lot better when the programs are running and you can pilot things and people are more willing to try and you have more time to devote to it. And with CEP, of course, everybody's eating breakfast at no charge. So here's some common ideas that people use. Okay, first of all, breakfast in the classroom. That is good for reaching just about every kid in the school. And I think it really does enhance the classroom day for the kids. But I got to admit, it's kind of a complicated program and it isn't right for every school. Another thing is a grab and go breakfast. That's where the students come in and you have some carts or some lines set up and they can take like a bag lunch or breakfast with them and just eat it. So there, but you kind of have to get the buy-in for the teachers to let the kids eat in the classrooms and figure out what to do about the trash, but it's not undoable. Lots of people do it. And then finally is the second chance breakfast, which would be at the recess or passing period. And it's really good if the cafeteria is located right by the play area. So like if the play area is at the other end of the school, maybe it's not so much, but you know, if you can just tap into some time where students are already free, that's another way that you can maximize your CEP benefits. Okay, we're going to stay on the slide and we're going to go to our third commercial. Now in the third commercial, there's a man and it's always a man. And he's sitting there in a suit and tie. And he's saying, have you been in a car accident? Have you been in a work accident? Have you ever used a herbicide or a pesticide? Have you drunk water at Camp Lejeune? Have you had a hernia surgery? Have you stepped on a crack and broke your mother's back? Call my office and see what your case is worth. But what he really means is what your case is worth to me. And even if we get any money, I'm going to get most of it. And you're only going to get a little bit of it. So go ahead and call if you want to. It's up to you. Okay, and then our third commercial is, look what kind of nice things we have in that CEP Communications Tool Kit. I really like this poster. It's colorful, it's pretty, it's simple. I think we have another one, also another resource. Yeah, our breakfast after the bell, and it is really comprehensive. It has everything that you would know, need to know, from checklists to helping plan menus, to helping you train your staff to how to promote it. There's just so much stuff there, and really take advantage of it to maximize your CEP. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled program. We can also start thinking ahead because it'll be March before we know it. You wait and see. So one of the things that we want to do to begin with is to watch for changes in ISP at the CEP site. Are they going up? Are they going down? And then if not all your schools are on CEP, you might want to look at some that were really close and keep monitoring those. Are those going up? Are those going down? Another thing you might want to be looking at is any sites that would benefit from grouping. Now, grouping seems to me to work best if you have some schools that have pretty close to 60% or more ISP, because they can bring the lower ones along. So you might start to want to start identifying those. Now we're going to stay on the slide, but for our fourth and final commercial, this one is a little bit of a two-parter. So it starts out with a firefighter in his hat, looking a little, maybe a little weary. Maybe he even has some smoke on him or something. And then there's a teacher in the classroom. She looks approachable, but also competent and a little stern if she needs to be. And then there's a nurse in her scrubs. She got a stethoscope around her neck. And the commercial is saying, vote for Joe Smith, because Joe Smith supports firefighters fighting fires and teachers teaching children and nurses helping people not die. And then at the end, Joe Smith gets on and say, I'm Joe Smith, and I endorse this message. Now, immediately the next second comes on. Learn the truth about Joe Smith. It has a bunch of like headlines smashed all over it. Did you know that Joe Smith supports using your tax dollars to buy luxury homes for child molesters in your neighborhood just to spite you, where they're going to be setting up meth labs and handing out fentanyl to elementary age kids that are just walking by? Don't vote for Joe Smith. Sponsored by Citizens Against Joe Smith, Joe Smith's first wife, president and CEO. Okay, but on to our next commercial. As you go through the year, we have a really nice CEP calculator. So you can use it to keep track as you go through the year. And you could even like set it up and just kind of like update it as more details come in throughout the year. It'd be really nice. And then I think also we have another slide on CEP. There we go. How to maximize your ISP. The first 90% are easy. The last 10% are hard. And this is the ways that you can help get every single kid going. So back to our regularly scheduled program. And it's very important as you go through the year to keep your boss informed. Nobody wants a surprise at the end of the year. You can be sure that they will want to know even like bad news, but hopefully we don't have it, but you want to know that. And then another thing that's good about keeping your boss informed is that they can help provide resources. For example, if you are having trouble with IT, not getting you data in a timely way, or if somebody that you've asked for information is not providing it, then they can help with that. And then maybe there are some data needs that you might have that the boss could also help you overcome with any kind of internal delays or things like that. Okay, I think we're ready to go to our Padlet. And if you haven't done these before, these are just so fun. When you go there, you're going to see that there's different areas that you can comment in. So go ahead, sign in, and we'll see you in the Padlet.
Thank you, Sally. Amazing. Yeah, so just a little bit more on the Padlet. That link is in the chat. And you'll see 4 main sections that we want to hear from you from. So to add your input, all you do is click the plus sign underneath the section you'd like to add a comment in, type away, hit publish, and then you can also, like social media, kind of react on each other's responses. So everyone who maybe is answering an email, shut that down, come back to the webinar, click the link in the chat for the Padlet, and let's hear from you. All right, Sally, feel free to take it away.
Okay, So we have what has been the best thing about having CEP in your district? What has been your biggest challenge with CEP? What part of CEP are you still struggling with? And are there resources that would help you make CEP work better in your district? Okay, so we're starting to get people saying they love to be able to have all the kids eat for free. You know, that has been our dream for so long, is to be able to do that. Yeah, those are, people are bringing out some very good points. The application process, it's like some parts of it work like, some years it works like magic, and some years it's like beating a tunnel through a mountain with a little hammer. Yeah, it sometimes it could be good. There is a lot, yeah, of LCFF, but you know what? We got to do the best for our kiddos, I think, and that's our job. Oh, income forms, yeah. Or not being able to get CEP for everyone. And under resources, we want to be sure that if there's something that we could provide to you that would help you, that that it's available to you. I'm wondering if like some helpful tips on filling out that SMP 95 and 19 would be a good idea. Ooh, that's a good idea from the county list. Oh, yeah. These are really good inputs. And I like being able to hear from everybody at the same time. Overall, I think our CEP is probably working well. Oh, that's a good idea. Snap outreach by a third party. I could think about that too. I might know some third parties. You might know some too. Yeah, figuring out which groupings are more favorable with CEP or provision 2. It kind of depends a lot on your current participation. So that's where you might start looking if you're like in the high 40s, but your participation is like in the 90s with free and reduced, that might be a kind of a red flag of what's going on there. Okay. Anything else in the Padlet? Okay, we want to go back to the meeting.
Sounds great. And feel free to keep using the Padlet. I'll put the link in there, and you can have access to this after the webinar. And we'll be sure to dig over it to make sure that we are creating resources and providing the assistance that you all need to make CEP possible. Okay. I think we're ready for Q&A. So if you haven't already, and maybe I can even pull a couple questions from the Padlet too, put those questions in the chat box. There's a Q&A box at the bottom, or sorry, not the chat box. Put your questions in the Q&A box, comments in the chat box. So we have one question that I'm going to get to in just one second, but you talked a little bit about provision 2, Sally, and I know this is a CEP webinar for maybe those districts that can't do CEP district-wide. Can you just explain like a really quick overview of what provision 2 is for folks who may not know?
Okay, provision 2 is another non-pricing option that's available. And anybody can be on provision 2. You don't have to qualify by having 40% or more. You could have 10% or 2%. But what you do with that is it's a multi-year process. So the first year is your base year. You collect applications and direct certifications and have every student's eligibility noted. And then you process them through the POS system and claim the meals by their eligibility, free, reduced priced, or full price. You can collect money or not in the base year. And then every month you get a percentage. 70% of the meals were free, 20% of the meals were reduced, 10% are paid in September. Then next September, after the base year is over and you have percentages for every month, you just get rid of the POS and you just count the total number of meals, and then they apply the percentages in the claim. So if you don't qualify for CEP, provision 2 might be a good choice for you.
Thank you, Sally. Awesome. So we have a question from the chat. Do we have to do verification if we are CEP? That part is a little confusing.
Okay, well, you shouldn't have collected any applications, so you don't have anything to verify. So the answer is you don't have to conduct verification. However, that doesn't mean that the state isn't going to send you a form anyway that says that you have to fill this form out anyway, even though all the answers are 0. So that might be what they're looking for, but yet no verification. Okay.
All right.
All right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ready for the next one?
Yeah.
Great. Can you please discuss the meaning of base year and how that translates for statuses for students in subsequent years? So for example, a student was homeless in base year, no longer homeless the following year. Can that still carry over?
The base year is the only year that you collect status for the students. So in the subsequent years on provision 2, you don't have that status information anymore. Everybody, it's just like in CEP, everybody doesn't have a status. They're just a student. And the first year, the base year, you can use it for LCFF, but in subsequent years, you don't have that data. Now, you could be talking to your CBO about, you could also establish a base year in LCFF that, wow, it lasts just as long as the provision 2 period does. So if they were smart, they would set up the provision 2 and the LCFF in the same base year, and then we would just use it for subsequent years and not have to worry about it. It's out there, it's easy, but sometimes convincing people is the hard part.
On the CEP side, I think this is my own question. So on the CEP side of things, like when you're establishing that first year ISP, kind of using that same example, could that eligibility continue on for future years? Or could you need to reassess every year?
The only data you're going to get on CEP is the direct certifications. And those are updated actually every month. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And if I remember correctly, each year, if your ISP gets higher, you can lock it in for another 4 years. If it goes lower, hold harmless though.
Yeah.
Okay, another question. How do we get homeless lists? Are those who stay with their friends and relatives considered to be homeless? This is coming from a very small district, and there isn't one person there that does that job.
I believe that the districts are required to keep track of homeless students because they're eligible not just for free meals, but for other benefits. Do you have a contact with the principal or the school secretary who might know the students that they're classifying as homeless? I'm not exactly sure if you're staying with friends and relatives, is that counts as homeless or not, because I'm not as familiar, and I would hate to give you the wrong answer and then you rely on it. But I'm sure there's some kind of definition of what covers that circumstance that you could probably find out and ask at the school sites. Because like I said, I believe they're required to keep that information.
Yeah, and I can look into that a little bit. USDA might have a definition for that. Mm-hmm. And if I find it, I'll put it in the chat so we all have that. Okay, a question I'm pulling from the chat. Remember, if you have questions, try to put them in the Q&A so we can keep track of them. When your district asks you for free and reduced data for CEP schools, do you give them the ISP percent or the percent you claim as free meals? So that's the ISP times 1.6.
If it's for like going on field trips and things like that, you give them the 1.6.
And I think, Sally, if I remember correctly, we wrote all this up in a resource somewhere. So I'm going to pull that resource.
Oh yeah, I think it is. Yeah, someplace. Yeah.
Yeah, because you can use different ones for different things. Okay. Other question. Back on the homeless list. So once you have that list, how does it get inputted into the direct certification list, or are those kept separate? Can you just describe a little bit more how that works?
No, they're directly certified. If the district has certified them as homeless, they are counted as directly certified. There's no separate, just like the Head Start kids, just like the migrant kids. Like when you fill out that big form that lists all the kids and the ones that qualify, you know, it says they're homeless and migrant and runaway and stuff like that.
Okay. If your district is opting to reapply for CEP in hopes of getting that higher ISP, what is the CEP enrollment snapshot date? Is it still April 1? And I can answer that. For this year, I don't believe there are any waivers in play, so it will be April 1. The past few years, there have been waivers to extend that, but that is the deadline. But I believe, Sally, you know, if February had a higher ISP, you can use that February data. Is that correct?
I don't know, Paige. I think you have to use that April 1st data.
Okay, so more reason to keep your direct cert list. Yeah. Okay, many questions in the chat. Just give me 1 second here. Our state review is different under CEP. This district is up for review this year. Good luck. And it's the first year CEP district wide. So how is that process any different in your experience, Sally?
What they're going to ask for is to review your CEP data. Like, you know, you turned in a form for that listed all the students, and then they're going to ask you for that background information. I'm sure that they will send you very detailed directions on how to do that.
Okay, there I think is a California specific question. So I'm actually going to pause that and we will answer that after the fact. We'll type in an answer or send you an email if you want to direct message me your contact information. But so this question is about adult meal pricing. Their state tool is indicating they need to charge at least $4.75 for an adult lunch if they are a non-pricing school. Is there another way to calculate meal prices so they can keep it around $4 range and keep teachers eating with them? Is there anything like the paid lunch equity tool where they don't have to increase if they have a positive cash balance excess fund?
Yeah, the adult meal price has to stay $4.75. But let me ask you a question. Did the adult take the whole meal? Do they take the milk? Do they take, you know, don't they usually come in and get like stuff from the salad bar or the entree or stuff like that? Maybe you would like to price your a la carte pricing so that if they pay $4, they would get an entree and a side dish of their choice. That would be allowable. I'm just saying they don't monitor the a la carte prices. Only the adult meal prices.
There, Sally. That's smart though. Yeah, I gotta have your workaround. Okay. Another question. You mentioned meals per labor hour as one of the KPIs. What is a good meal per labor hour to determine efficiency and adequate staffing? This person has heard different ranges and wondering if you'd speak to a little bit about that.
There's lots of different ranges because there's lots of different ways of serving meals. And one of the good things about keeping your own KPIs is that you can start to establish what your district should have. Now, for a starting point, I would use 25 because that's kind of an easy figure to remember. It's pretty reliable in most situations. There are places where it's not reliable, like if you have scratch cooking and at a really small school, or if you have a super efficient central kitchen. But I would start with 25 and then see how that works out for you. But again, keep your own data for a while. You'll start to see the patterns in your district. You'll probably start to find some sites have a higher one and sometimes have a lower one, and then you can try to figure out why that is. Okay, I think we had some questions in the Padlet too, didn't we?
Oh,
Paige?
totally forgot about the Padlet. Let me pull that up.
That was so fun.
No, I do. I was just very focused on the Q&A box, which feel free to continue putting in there. Yes, Allie, if you see something on the Padlet, feel free to address it.
Oh yeah, like you think I'm smart enough to get into the I'm a boomer.
I will pull some. So partial CEP implementation. I know that's your favorite term to call it. We had a long chat about what to call this thing when not all your schools are CEP. It can be very confusing for adult household members. Do you have any tips on managing that? And I will put a link to our resource about this topic in the chat.
Yes, you know, it's usually pretty standard on the school individual websites to say a lot of information about each individual school. And that should definitely be in there as far as whether the meals are served at no charge or not. And, you know, yeah, it can be confusing, but I think you can probably unconfuse people really easily. I usually just, in a situation like that, I usually just be honest and say, you know, if I could serve it free to every student, I would do that. But I can't. And so I'm doing the best I can. I was able to get these schools, not these schools. We're going to keep trying, and maybe someday, you know, it'll all be there. But that's kind of how we have to do.
Got to be honest. Yeah. Tips. Unfortunately, some of our listeners are having issues right now with decreased revenue, which is not fun. And we understand, you know, everything is extra expensive these days to add on top of that. Do you have any tips for this listener?
Well, that's where you want to go back to your KPIs and start to look at, I would start to look at the percentages. So what is your percentage of your revenue food costs, and what is your percentage of your revenue labor? And that is the food service director's eternal challenge, is to keep those two in flux, because that's where almost all your money goes. And that should give you a hint on where you can make some possible savings. So say if you've gone and you find that, like, because of decreased revenue, now your labor is a lot higher, then you would start to do the things that you do when your labor is too high. You know, limit overtime, rework the work schedule, see if you can have things be more efficient, and try to get that labor cost more under control. If it's in the food cost, then you want to start to do the things that you do when your food cost is too high. Use more commodities. Go through and analyze the cost of your entrees and take off the ones that cost the most and up the ones that are less expensive and that kind of thing. I think the commodity program this year is just like a total train wreck. And I think there's a lot of excess stuff out there. So you might be able to get some stuff out of the state accounts to help tide you over in some areas if you're running low on that. But yeah, that's just the tried and true of how we control our programs.
Tough topic, but thank you for talking about it. And just going back to a conversation we had about what type of data to use for, for example, state education funding or discounts on field trips, that is on the alternative income forms resource that I just put in the chat. And we actually, from the Padlet, Sally, if you had any tips for those, so some states, if this does not apply to you, feel free to pause for a second, but some states require alternative income forms, and those can be called many things: household income forms, benefits forms, in place for your reduced price meal applications. Do you have any tips for states, because I know California uses these, for collecting those from families?
One of the big things is to make it part of the registration process. A lot of people do the online registration. I mean, really, who wouldn't? I mean, why you want to fill out all those forms, and you just go through it. I saw a real nice one at one district that they had was, it just said like, select. It was like number of people in your household. You hit the button. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then it went to what's your family's annual income? And there was only 3 choices. What was the free range? What was the reduced range? And everything else. And then you just clicked that and then you were done. I mean, it was that fast and that easy, yeah.
Okay, a question from the Q&A box. Is the CEP, I guess like the ISP, based on direct cert students only, or participation of direct certification? Just directly certified students.
Not based on participation. It's based on direct certs only.
Okay. When calculating MPLH, which I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure what that means. If you want to explain
per hour.
Meals per hour, that's it. Are the calculations based on the entire district, or it should be based by school site?
Well, you can do it any way that you want to do it that would give you the information you're looking for. A lot of times the school site information lets you compare similar sites. Or if you're looking at your overall for the district, then you would know exactly what you had for the whole district. But one of the things that meals per labor hour can help you do is identify inefficiencies in labor. And that's why doing it at a site level is usually really helpful.
Great. And I'm going to remember that acronym now. So I also see in here, there's some schools that are on their last year of CEP, so year 4, and they're looking to year 5, new cycle, and not sure if they can make it work. Do you have any tips for this year to kind of get prepared for that?
Well, I would say the stuff that we've already talked about, keep monitoring it month by month, and then you'll know when you get there, if what's going to be the right decision for your district that you'll have to make in the spring. So good that they've already picked up that they might be having some issues. There's still time to try to track down everybody. Remember, the first 90% are easy, the last 10% is hard.
Yeah. I will also flag the grace year that is allowed by USDA for a CEP district. So there's this grace period, the year 5, where you don't have to fully transition off of CEP. So our good friends at the Food Research and Action Center have a great resource on that. I just put it in the chat there. So that might save you for another year at least. Okay, another question. Going back to which percentage to use, ISP versus the claiming rate, the district wants to know what should be used for LCFF funding for the CEP school. Would it only be be from information gathered through alternative forms?
Yeah, the alternative forms and the direct certifications. And when I'm talking to the CBOs about this, they say, okay, you know, I know you're freaking out, but first of all, even under the traditional system, you have the direct certifications. You already had that. You had that in the past. You have it now. You're going to have it going forward. Then there's always families that's never going to qualify. They just make too much money. So it doesn't really matter. So we're only talking about the difference between that sort of middle one. And we've always used the free and reduced price data to get that middle information. Now, everybody has known forever that applications are not accurate. I used to, when I was doing applications, I would set aside all the ones that I had to turn down and call them, and I could salvage about 30% of them. Okay, that's a pretty high fail rate, you know? So already they were missing people and stuff like that. The application, the alternative income form is so much easier for families to cope with, so much easier to collect. It's a better system than the free and reduced price meals. And just try to, you know, continue to convince them that that is a better way to do it. I mean, they're used to the free and reduced price meals because they didn't have to mess with it, but it wasn't that good of a system anyway. And plus a lot of people, you know, they made the application work for them. So there's less motive for them to do that with an alternate form.
True. Or alternative, if all meals were provided free to all students everywhere across the nation. But
I know.
we'll save that for another webinar. That's
right.
Awesome. We might have time for one or two more questions. So I'll look to the Padlet, but feel free to put them in the Q&A. I can also capture them from the chat. And then Sally, are there any topics that have been brought up that you'd like to add anything more to?
I'm just glad that people were able to get onto CEP, despite all of its little headaches and things like that behind the scenes. And this, if the legislature had just written the laws better about capturing family income, our lives would be so much easier. But they didn't. But yeah, but overall, I think if we look at what is the benefit to our students and what is the benefit to our families and what is the benefit that we're providing. I mean, you know, we always focus on the free and reduced price kids, but I think sometimes that's a mistake because every child needs to eat their lunch. Every child needs to have their nourishment in order to learn. And that's what we're trying to do here. And this reflects our value that this is an important part of the school day. And it's a benefit that every child can take advantage of. They don't, we talk about diversity and equity and all that, separating them out by income. So obviously it's just totally counter to that value. And I think CEP, again, just philosophically reflects that value. And I think that's a good value to have.
Hear, hear. With that, if there's additional questions, continue to put them in the Q&A box and we will try to answer them. We'll pull them and answer them after the call, but I don't want to muddy the waters with that great and final words from Sally. So with that, let's go back to the presentation. Okay, so some additional resources for those districts that maybe are partial or site-based CEP, don't have CEP at all of their schools. We do have a school meals applications outreach toolkit that provides lots of great examples for those schools that are still collecting through reduced price meal applications. Next slide. And then we also have a new great resource about increasing participation, which is key, right, to getting that revenue in to make CEP work using alternative meal service models. So those breakfast after the bell models, and even getting innovative with lunch. I think we already mentioned this, but alternative income forms are important in certain states. And this is actually a great resource for any state, even if you don't collect alternative income forms, because it does go through the types of data you can use in place of free reduced price meal application data for various sources of funding or discounts for students. In case you missed it, we are operating this year under some special regulations that were passed through the Keep Kids Fed Act, including some increased meal reimbursements and some other good things. So we had a webinar with USDA, so we encourage you to check that out. And all these links will be live in the slides that we send out after the webinar. We also, I think this might be one of the last webinars on, for our back to school webinar series. I think we have one more on culturally appropriate meals, but feel free to go back to nokidhungry.org or bestpractices.nokidhungry.org/webinars to listen to any of our webinars past and sign up for future webinars. We also, because SNAP is so important to direct certification, which is so important to CEP, we definitely wanted to flag this webinar that my colleague Chloe did, all about how SNAP fuels learning and SNAP outreach in schools. Some additional resources, we know staffing is really tough right now, so I wanted to give you the links to those, and also some tips for managing supply chain disruptions. And last but not least, we want you to stay in touch. So if you're not signed up already, please do sign up for our newsletter. That's bestpractices.nokidhungry.org/subscribe and visit our website. And after exiting the webinar, a short survey will appear on your screen. So please do take a moment to complete that survey. With that, that is it from me. You can always get in touch there's my email there. And thank you so much, Sally. Do you have any last words for our attendees?
Okay, good luck with CEP. You can do it.
Yes, and if you ever wanted to get connected to Sally directly, you can also email me, that pcorney@strengths.org, and we'll get you in touch with Sally. And yes, good luck, and we hope that this year is a great year for you. Have a good day.